Hi, I'm Dave Derr, the president of Empirical Labs. We're going to be giving you a little bit of a demo here today of some of our products. For those of you that don't make the AES shows, you'll get to see a little bit of the demos that we do with those. I'd also like to thank Cooster McAllister at Record Plant Remote. We're here in his beautiful truck, and it's always a pleasure to work with Cooster. And he's an old friend of ours and one of our first users around the area. And we really appreciate him letting us use this facility here. What I have here is the Distressor, the first product that we made. The Distressor was originally conceived back when I got my first vintage compressors. I was an engineer at Eventide back in starting about '87, and I had a little recording studio that gradually grew into a bigger recording studio. And having been a musician for many years in the past, I'd been exposed to a lot of vintage gear, and I always kept thinking, like, I remember these compressors having a certain sound, and in order to get those compressors, this is back in the maybe around 1990, they were at that point vintage, and they were very expensive. And I finally was able to save up and buy a few, and immediately I realized that my impressions were right. The old compressors had a real sound and character, which is really just vacant on a lot of the new gear out there. It's strange that many years we tried to get more and more accurate gear, and with the coming of the digital age, of course, we got very accurate, but very quickly became apparent that maybe this isn't the most pleasing thing. So anyway, I had my first tape deck, professional tape deck that I got was an old M56 16-track 2-inch analog. When I started recording on that, it was unbelievable, the low end that I got off of that. I recorded a lot at 15 IPS, and when I got my first digital recorder, it was immediately obvious that there was something not as fun sounding. It just, everything took more work to get the sound full and natural. And I don't know if natural is the right term, but it definitely was more of a fight. And I still had my old 16-track, so along with scopes and distortion analyzers, I spent a good deal of time listening and looking at the signals, and certain things become apparent, both measurably and audibly. The old 16-track, first of all, had a lot of low-frequency distortion. It wasn't apparent as distortion, but it showed up as harmonics that made things more apparently bassier. And also the high end. The saturation of the high frequencies caused by a combination of the bias frequency and high frequencies self-erasing themselves made the high end much smoother and warmer. Warm is a very popular phrase nowadays, but it's a real effect. With analog tape decks, it's a combination of the high frequency softness combined with low frequency distortion and modulation, which makes the low frequencies more apparent and the high frequencies a little bit more pleasing to your ear. So anyway, when I started thinking about a product to do, the first thing that became apparent was in the compressors. EQs, there's a lot of subtle differences, but the compressors to me were night and day between the old vintage units and the newer VCA-based models. So I spent some time investigating the older units and found that they used nonlinear gain elements, meaning you add a volt to the control voltage and you have a 10 dB gain, another volt, you have another 10 dB gain. That's not the way the older units worked, and so I immediately went that route because it looked like an easier way to achieve what I wanted. And along the way I found that I could do a number of things. First of all, I could make the units reproducible from one to the other, and second of all, by using digital circuitry, in the distressor, instead of a ratio knob, I have a stepped ratio control, and not only goes through the ratios in a traditional manner, but in 4 cases it actually switches in and out different circuitry. And what I did was I tried to emulate using various test tones in my ear some of the older devices. The 1176 was one of my favorites, the first to go after. Then I went after the EL8 and then I went after a Fairchild 670, which later I found out was one that was pretty far out of calibration. And finally I emulated a couple of the Neve, which were really classics, very fast and smooth, which incidentally ended up using nonlinear gain elements also. But anyway, by combining a bunch of modern techniques with old techniques, we came up with a distressor. And that's basically the outcome we were looking for, was to get the old sound with reproducibility and with a lot of versatility and a lot of control added back to the user in a modern box. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the demo here.